Reference number 3, to analyze an author's rhetoric, but also changed in the way that I view the rhetoric itself. So, for example, at first when I learned to fondle details by Nabokov, close read as according to prose, and use the flashlight theory by Perrine, in my heart I didn't really understand why they were necessary, because I had viewed the author as simply a teacher. I thought that his or her job was to tell the story in such a way that I would clearly know exactly what their message was. So after being in this class for 3 quarters, I now view an author's work as a piece of art, a complex image designed to point a reader towards its intended message. So when I thought about it, uh, was literature, is literature not just a different form of art? Creators of art and writers, they both go through the same process. They tune all the little details, they create vivid images, they depict stories. They do this all in an effort to make the reader understand their message. So if someone were to look at the Mona Lisa, they could easily tell you a lot of things about it. That it's a portrait of a woman. They could tell you details about the brushstrokes, the color, the texture. So if I stopped at this point of analyzing the painting, that's pretty much where I was at in terms of analyzing literature. So I would be able to label instances of ethos, pathos, logos, motifs, symbols, character foils, and pretty much anything you can imagine. However, I missed out on the last and perhaps most important step, which is the why behind everything. So, what was the purpose behind the painting? Why did the author paint it the way he did? What message was he or she trying to send? So, after a lot of learning and practicing this class, I am able to see literature on that deeper level. So out of the different skills and concepts that I learned this year, some of them clicked with me right away. Others took longer for my mind to digest. One of the ideas that most intrigued me was the iceberg theory by Ernest Hemingway. It fascinated me because it summed up pretty much several of our good readers' goals into just one idea. Hemingway said that he provides 1/8 of the information and leaves 7/8 up for the reader. So it leaves a lot for interpretation. It was a combination of several of our goals: Nabokov's fondling of details, mountaintop theory, and Perrine's flashlight theory. Because one must first examine the details. They have to form a hypothesis and meet the author halfway. And then finally they have to examine how valid that hypothesis is by seeing if it falls within the beam of the flashlight. This idea really changed the way I saw literature. For me, it finally shifted the responsibility of extracting meaning out of a text fully onto the reader, rather than expecting the author to lay it out for me. For instance, when I read the scene in Crook's room in chapter 4, I was able to figure out Steinbeck's message, even though he didn't explicitly mention it. So I wrote, because Curly's wife is herself controlled by men, it is very ironic that she is treating crooks like this. A possible message of Steinbeck's could be that it is human nature to prey on others, since even the oppressed choose to oppress those lower than them. So here I was, you could say I was given 1/8 of the information. I looked through the words and I saw what the artist / writer behind those words wanted me to understand. So overall, Hemingway's iceberg theory contributed a lot to my current knowledge and perspective towards literature. So the iceberg theory helps me visualize how to derive a deeper meaning from the text, but simply doing that is not really enough either. One must also be able to explain why the author replaces ideas in their work. So finding themes within an author's work is a good skill, but as I stated before, it's only half of the story. Equally equally important, if not more important, uh, is an ability to consider an author's purpose, uh, like in by making their work. For instance, when I first read Serving in Florida, I first thought that this was just going to be another one of those books that was just basically a documentary. I thought that it would be full of sob stories and stats to feel the reader feel sorry for poor people. But as I read more closely, I realized that Ehrenreich had a purpose for each and every personal story that she provided. They all meshed together seamlessly, uh, and it showed me her message, just like an author, just like an artist uh, integrates all the elements of his or her painting to create a certain impression. When I was analyzing it, I wrote, uh, she mentions the fact that Gail is planning on moving into a hotel because she can't afford the payment for an apartment. She also talks about other ways poor people are actually forced to spend more money, including insurance and buying food. All this comes together to show that this are poor, the people who already are in need of help. I analyzed several different elements of Ehrenreich's writing to come up with a purpose for why she included these examples. So another way that I make sense of an author's purpose is through the analysis of the symbols they include. So Ehrenreich's story uh, kind of represents the poor people, like the plight of poor people in the United States. It's not really symbolic because they're the people in it are real, and so like they're not placed there by the author. So an author that does a lot of symbols is Lorraine Hansberry in her play A Raisin in the Sun. Uh, so uh, in it, I was able to analyze her use of the plant symbol and determine her purpose for including it. I wrote, the plant symbolizes the hope of the youngers for a better dream. The plant is dying, showing that the American dream is unachievable, at least for them. Yet it clings to life, which represents the youngers still holding onto the hope, even though it will most likely never come. Beyond that, she might also be saying something about the nature of the American dream itself, that the American dream in general is a dying hope that we all still cling to. So here I was able to not only connect the symbol to a theme of the play, but also to a wider message. This is something that I would probably just simply not be able to do without this new perspective on literature that I have right now. Just like I now see and analyze literature as a form of art, the same goes for other types of works. This quarter, we also studied another form of art, which is film. So in Capitalism, a Love Story, Michael Moore, in it, he pretty much exposes the immoral practices that capitalism kind of forces people to do. However, the way he does it, I found to be interesting because throughout almost the entire documentary, he presents his argument in almost a sarcastic fashion. For instance, when he's talking about derivatives with there's on Wall Street, he acts like he's clueless and just doesn't know anything that's going on. Uh, so, ask him his use of music in his film. I found that he put in a lot of effort, even in a minor part of the film. So when I was analyzing, I wrote Moore uses lighthearted, almost clowny music throughout the film, uh, even sometimes during the description of heavy subjects. It almost in a way makes these issues with capitalism seem even more ridiculous. Also, doing so helps his film not be too cliche. Just like I've mentioned before, art is complex. It involves many different elements all coming together to form the final product. So even in something as minor as music, I was able to connect that part with the whole thing, the film, and explain Michael Moore's purpose for doing it. So throughout these 3 quarters, I've been challenged a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, and will definitely continue to make them. But it is fine as long as I'm always refining my experience with the understanding of these of the texts and also the author's voice behind it. So as a result of making all those mistakes, I've learned to view literature as a piece of art. So finally, going on to next quarter and beyond, I will take my new understanding of literature and apply it to what I read in the future.